As Jane and Alan walked into the truck stop, Vivian ran up to them and hugged Jane. Then shyly, she turned to Alan with a little smile, hugged Alan, then led them to their usual table and took their order. Alan looked over the restaurant customers and warned Vi to avoid a certain table. She asked why and he replied, "That one guy sitting there seems very familiar, and not in a good way." Vi said, "Well, that's Shelley's table, but I'll warn her." As Vi walked to the kitchen, the man that worried Alan stood. He angled over to intercept Vivian. Alan stood and began to walk toward the eventual intersection of Vivian and the man. Jane stepped out and ran around the restaurant, entered the kitchen, ran to the dining room door, and watched through the little window. As the stranger approached Vivian, Alan shouted, "Don't touch her. Step back away." The man threw up his hands and stepped back. He turned, drew out a pistol, and shot Alan. As the man began to aim at Alan, Jane brought her nightstick down on the wrist of the gun hand, breaking his arm. Then she brought her nightstick up between his legs as hard as she could, and the man collapsed. Then Jane landed in the middle of his back with both knees. She twisted the man's broken arm and cuffed it, then the other. Jane shouted at Shelley to call 911 and ask for an ambulance and backup. Then Jane asked two burly truckers to help her get the shooter up and secure it in an oak chair. Then, Jane asked the manager for the surveillance tape. The ambulance arrived and took Alan to the hospital emergency room. Seconds later, the sheriff arrived. Jane explained what had happened. Amber took Jane and Vivian in her arms to help them calm down. Jane was crying, and Vivian was bawling. The manager told Vivian to go home. The sheriff told Jane to get over to the hospital and be there for Alan. When Jane entered the emergency room and asked where Alan was, the receptionist told her that he was in the operating room with Drs. Phillips. The receptionist then stepped over to the door to the operating room and told whoever was there that Jane was in the waiting room. Susan stepped out and waved Jane to go in with her. "Alan's awake if you want to talk to him before we put him under." Jane started to hug Susan, then stopped short. "Thank you, Susan." Jane stepped over, leaned down, and kissed Alan. Crying, she said, "Captain Alan Arthur Smith, you had better not leave me." Alan looked up at her. "Not a chance in hell. You're never going to get rid of me. I'll be home tonight." Jane looked at Susan, and Susan shrugged, smiled, and shook her head. "No." Amber took Jane to a chair, sat her down, took her hand, and just sat there with Jane and waited. "Don't worry, Jane, Susan loves Alan, and she will do everything she can to see him through this alive." Jane asked, "Why is Susan doing the surgery? I thought she was a pediatrician." Amber replied, "Susan was a surgeon before she went into pediatrics. From what I have heard from some colleagues of ours, she is a very skilled surgeon, very deft hands, and a lot of heart. She has always become emotionally involved with every patient, which is why she switched to working with kids. But here, in our little county, she has become the go-to surgeon." Jane looked at Amber and started bawling. "Oh God, please save Alan, please save Alan. Give Susan a steady hand and guide her as she works to save him." Roger and Elizabeth came in and sat beside Jane and Amber, tears running down their cheeks. "Jane, is Dad all right?" Amber replied, "Your mom is working on him, and your stepdad is helping. They'll get him through this." Hugs all around, then more quiet waiting. Amber got up and stuck her head in the operating room. "David, much longer?" David replied, "Probably about another hour or two." Amber said, "I'm going to take Jane, Roger, and Elizabeth to get something to eat. We'll be back in about an hour." She walked back to the little group. "Get your stuff, we'll go to the truck stop and get something to eat, then we'll come back here." Jane started to say something, but Amber pulled her up, and they all walked out to her patrol car and drove to the truck stop. At the restaurant, they saw Vivian and Frank, Vi's father, at a table and walked over and joined them. Everyone ordered something light and warm. While they ate, they prayed in their heart for the people in the operating room, Alan, Susan, and David. Obviously, Vivian had been crying. "It's my fault. Everyone gets hurt because of me. I wish I was dead." Jane wrapped her arms around Vivian, whispering, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault. That, blankety blank, meant to hurt you. We are here to safeguard our citizens." Amber chimed in, "Vi, it's not your fault. I want you to call me tomorrow and let's make time to talk. Okay?" Vivian replied, "Yeah, okay." Jane looked at Vi and whispered in her ear, "Do you remember when we were watching you walk home at night?" Vi replied, "Yes." Jane continued, Do you know that Alan is the one who started that night watch routine? Vi's eyebrows shot up. He started it? Jane answered, yes, every night you worked, we were watching, and the reason was because you are so beautiful, kind, and well, just plain good. He felt you needed to be protected. Vivian smiled through her tears. Jane, I'm sorry, but I love Alan. I'll never do anything to come between you and him, but I do love him. Jane replied, I know, I can see it when we come in to eat. And it's okay. As long as you remember that he belongs to me. Jane laughed. Do you know that I know at least 2 other great gals who love Alan? Vi asked, who? Jane said, well, that, I'm not going to tell you, just keep your eyes open, and you will find out by yourself. Just remember that Alan thinks that you are worth putting his life on the line to protect you. Vi could only cry, but in a way that showed that what Jane had told her made her feel so much better. The 4, Amber, Jane, Roger, and Elizabeth, returned to the hospital, and as they entered the waiting room, Susan came out of the operating room, smiling. He's going to be all right. He's in the recovery room right now, but he should be taken to his room in about a half hour. Susan went over to the 4 and said, you can go see him after he is taken to his room, room 4. The nurse will come out and tell you when they will move him. If you can, he would need to see all 4 of you. He will certainly need to see the 4 most important people in his life, the 4 who love him the most. Roger looked at Amber. You love my dad too? Amber replied, yes Roger, I do, your dad is my brother. Roger asked, your brother? Amber answered, my brother Curtis, was killed in Vietnam. Your dad knew him and is so much like my brother that we vowed to be brother and sister for each other. So yes, I love your dad, my brother. It was close to midnight when the nurse told the 4 they could see Alan. The 4 walked into room 4, and Alan croaked out, hi. I'm so glad to see you guys. Jane kissed him very gently, and he kissed her back. The 2 kids gently kissed and hugged their dad, and Amber kissed his cheek. Alan smiled, thank you guys, you know I love you. He reached out and touched each of them. Thank you, sis. It's very late, and I am so tired. Come see me tomorrow, when you can. Jane, can you stay a moment? Amber took the 2 kids out. Bro, I'll see you tomorrow. Come on kids. Jane stayed and sat in a chair very near his bed. What? Alan smiled a tired smile. Would you make love to me? Please. She reached under the blanket, but he said, no. I need you. Remember our first time together, the slow, gentle love I gave you? That's what I need. She got up, pulled down the shades, and did as Alan asked. He said, just be careful of my wound. Oh, yes. This is wonderful. The next afternoon, Alan was visited by Vivian. She looked a little down but went to the side of his bed. Captain Smith, Alan said, please call me Alan. It is my name. She replied, Alan, thank you. And she began to cry. I'm so sorry. Alan reached up and touched her cheek. It's not your fault, Vivian said, but you've gotten hurt before because of me. Alan took her hand. It's because of the evil in the world. Which is why I have a job that I find fulfilling. He smiled at her. Thank you for coming to see me. She looked at him. Do you want me to leave? He replied, no. You can stay as long as you like. But I might drift off at times. She took his hand and just sat there and watched him sleep. Her heart melted within her, and her love for Alan grew. She went home after about an hour, and she called Amber to make an appointment to talk. Vivian and Amber agreed to meet at the tea room and talk every Saturday morning for about an hour. At their first session they both confessed their deep love for Alan. Then they began to discuss Vivian's belief that all the trouble was her fault. Vivian and Amber met every Saturday morning for over a year before Vi began to realize that she was not at fault. Vi asked Amber about Jane's remark about the 2 other women who love Alan. Amber replied, well, you know I'm one. The other is his ex. There are probably a dozen more. He is one of the kindest men I know, well-built, strong, courageous, and darn good-looking. Jane was called before the state Senate's Police Oversight Subcommittee. There were 3 senators that sat in the sheriff department conference room to interview Jane about the complaint from the guy that had shot Alan. Jane was accused of police brutality, use of excessive force. As the 3 senators questioned her, It was evident that their intent was to make her an example of a bad cop. Jane remained calm, answering their questions until the senator in the middle began to berate her. Jane quietly asked whether she could ask them a couple of questions. They gave her leave to ask. The first question she asked, looking into the eyes of the senator, "Have you ever been a police officer?" The senator answered, "No." She turned to the man to the right, "You?" He answered, "No." Then she turned to the man to the left, "You?" Again, he responded, "No." At this point, I will have to paraphrase Jane's words because of the very colorful vocabulary she used. "What is your background?" "3 low-life ambulance chasing shysters." "Have you seen the surveillance tape?" They replied that they had not. Jane asked them to watch. The first thing Jane pointed out was Vivian. "What do you notice about this young waitress?" The 3 men shrugged. Jane demanded, "Look at her." Jane raised her voice, "She is beautiful, a little shy, and she is 17 years old. She is a minor." Then a little calmer, "What do you notice about the suspect?" Again, they shrugged. Jane pointed to his right jacket pocket. "Look, what do you think that bulge might be?" The 3 men looked with blank expressions. "What?" Jane said, "Just watch." What they saw next was the man stepping back, turning and pulling out a pistol, then he shot Alan. After a moment he seemed to be taking aim at Alan, when Jane hit his gun arm with her nightstick, and without a hesitation she brought the nightstick up between his legs and he collapsed. Then Jane landed on his back with both knees and cuffed him. The middle senator said, "Don't you think that was a little overboard?" Jane spun toward him, hit the table between them shouting, "That blankety blank shot my partner, he shot my captain, he shot my husband." A cop has the responsibility to have his partner's back. Of course, I could have just shot the blankety blank in the head, and you wouldn't be here. But the blankety blank now gets to stand trial. I hope you 3 blankety blank are satisfied. Maybe, when your wife is being attacked you'll have her rescue her up on charges. Do you want me to resign? She took her badge off and threw it like a ninja star at the man in the center. Sheriff Murdoch stepped in and said, "Corporal Smith, stand down." Jane snapped to attention. The sheriff spoke quietly, "This farce has gone on long enough. You 3 gentlemen have 5 minutes to get out of my county, or you will see the inside of my jail." "Oh, just a moment, Deputy Smith, please take time today to sew on your new chevrons." And he handed Jane a set of sergeant stripes. Then he turned to the senators, "Your 5 minutes start now." When Jane went in to visit Alan, she was wearing her new chevrons. Alan remarked, "Honey, another promotion. Congratulations. I'm proud of you." Jane blushed and kissed Alan. I don't care about the promotion, I am just glad you're still with me." After a week, Alan was allowed to go home with appointments with Susan twice a week until he could be released to light duty. Susan looked at Jane and said, "Only gentle hanky-panky until I say that anything more would be okay." After 2 weeks in the hospital and a month at home, Alan was allowed to ride with Jane on patrol, with a strong warning from Susan not to get too heavily engaged in the physical aspects of police work. Susan smiled at Alan. "Alan, I know that you will not heed my warning when another's life is at stake. But try to take it easy when you can, please." He nodded his head. She kissed his cheek and that was that. The assignments were quiet ones. Charlie 1 took 7 at the truck stop every day, and every day Vivian would hurry over to take them to their usual table. Things had changed there at the truck stop. There were sheriff's deputies present at every meal time. The harassment of the waitresses was frowned upon by every regular patron and was called out by multiple regulars. This kept the truck jockeys in line most of the time. But Vi was always glad to see Jane and Alan. One Wednesday evening Jane asked Vivian, Frank, Roger, Elizabeth, David, and Susan to have dinner with her and Alan. After a delightful meal, some light banter and laughter, Jane asked for everyone's attention. She turned to Alan, "Darling, I'm so sorry about this. Susan, would you fill everyone on the reason for this dinner? I don't think I can." Susan took on a grim expression. "Jane has ovarian cancer." Jane started to cry. Susan went on, "I checked on the records of her mother and sister. Their cancer was discovered about 6 months before the end." Susan looked at the shocked expression on Alan's face. "I'm so sorry, Alan, but Jane's cancer is the same as her mom and sister." She has about 6 months left. Alan collapsed to the floor, wailing like that proverbial lost soul in the depths of hell. David and Frank helped him to sit on the sofa. Jane put her arms around him and cried, "I'm so sorry, darling." Roger, Elizabeth, and Vivian sat at the table, frozen in shock. Alan croaked out, I. Susan stood and said, "We're so sorry, but I think we had better go and leave Jane and Alan to comfort each other." But everyone helped clean up the dining room and kitchen, then they quietly saw themselves out. Alan and Jane held on to each other and cried, then they made gentle love and went to bed.